Hello, Dion Hinchcliffe here, VP and Principal Analyst at Constellation Research, covering the future of work and CIO issues.
And I'm Doug Henschen, VP and Principal Analyst, covering data to decisions. And we're your co-hosts for episode 51 of CRTV.
I can't believe we're at episode 51 already. And we're here to talk about news, trends, and innovations in enterprise technology.
Well, in this episode, following the news, Dion is going to share his analysis of ChatGPT and all the buzz about generative AI and large language models.
And then we'll revisit our Constellation Connect Enterprise event for highlights from Doug's panel on the foundation of digital business, data-driven decision-making. But first, let's get to the news.
Well, in case you weren't aware, workflow and automation are hot. As evidence, ServiceNow reported yet another strong quarter. In late January, the company ended 2022 with a 24% increase in annual revenue, up to $6.8 billion. And they set their 2023 revenue outlook at $8.5 billion. So ServiceNow getting to be a really big company. CEO Bill McDermott was understandably upbeat. He noted that there would be no layoffs at ServiceNow, bucking the Silicon Valley trend. And he said, C-level buyers don't want long-term roadmaps to clean up a siloed mess of point solutions. They want integration, speed, automation, great experiences, and business impact. That's like verbatim from the customers we talked to. Also confirming this trend is MuleSoft's annual connectivity benchmark report released on February 1. The survey noted that now that non-IT roles are requesting automation, orgs are turning more to these no-code, low-code tools and approaches to meet that demand. But obstacles to this automation trend remain, with the 1,000+ respondents to the MuleSoft survey citing integration issues, lack of skills and experience within IT, risk management, compliance, and legal challenges topping the obstacles to business transformation. So Dion, I've seen the demand from and the response from automation vendors, from application vendors, from integration vendors, but they're just getting started with these low-code and particularly the no-code options. So the good news, I think the data and tech-savvy business users that want to do it are going to have a lot more options for automation going forward.
Yeah, no question about it. I mean, it's interesting. In my CIO surveys over the last 3 years or so, automation's been the number one way that the CIO is planning to provide more value to the business. So we clearly see that there. But I think that low code, is finally broken out after tracking that space for 30 years, through 4GLs and mashups and all of that. Low code is really breaking out with a lot of very compelling solutions that are enterprise ready. It's great, just in time to be crushed by artificial intelligence generated code. So pretty soon you're going to be able to ask for any app that you can imagine, and the AI will just generate it for you. So that's where it's going to go to all like no code and all just conversational app generation. It's amazing. And speaking of which, ChatGPT remains as viral as ever. It's the fastest application ever to reach 1 million users, just 5 days. And despite many people starting to poke holes in some of the results, we're seeing a lot of researchers and people who really know the domains asking questions and finding flaws in a lot of the answers. Nevertheless, people find it valuable and they're using it quite a bit. And now OpenAI, the creator of ChatGPT, and the large language model behind it, GPT-3, has just launched today a ChatGPT Plus for $20 a month, which will get prioritized access and allow users to not have to wait in line. Because right now the wait list, it takes a while to get inside of ChatGPT and start using the very compute-intensive resources that it has. But that's not all. Microsoft has made a major investment, and it's in OpenAI and hoping to capitalize on the success of ChatGPT. And it's announced a new Microsoft Teams Premium feature that will use the ChatGPT technology to take notes, track follow-up, so actually be able to understand what happened in the meeting and say, here's the list of 5 things that you talked about that you said you wanted to follow up on, and automatically generate that and distribute that. And that's what we're really seeing, is so much of the future of work is going to be automated, and we can really focus on the strategic nature of our work, and all of these tools will really help us get all those little details out of our way. We don't have to take notes, we don't have to track follow-ups. All will be done for us. We can just focus on what humans are really good at, and that seems to be the future. But ChatGPT remains white hot. and they're starting to already commercially capitalize on it. So it's great to see.
Given its stake in OpenAI, it's really up to Microsoft to make the most of ChatGPT. I saw an announcement on February 2 that Microsoft's next experiment is to expose ChatGPT to combined data from Microsoft 365 and CRM systems, their own or others, to give it context. And then ChatGPT would then suggest, their announcement said, suggest or create personalized promotions and offers that salespeople would send out via the Microsoft Viva sales app. What could go wrong, I ask? I mean, I think this is where, are we going to have people like looking at suggestions and tuning and tweaking them, or are they just going to like let her rip and just rely on ChatGPT out of the box, like we're seeing with many college students writing term papers?
I am worried that we're all going to be talking to ChatGPT a lot, whether that's for sales or support or anything. It's going to be interesting.
All right, my second news item is about sort of the bloom coming off the rose when it comes to cloud computing. A survey released last week by IT service management firm Device42 shows no surprise that companies sure still want to move more workloads and expect to spend more on cloud capacity in the coming years. But there's also some signs of frustration and some even signs of heels digging in. For example, 50% of the 300 respondents said they're going to continue to rely on on-premises data centers. Only 13% said the cloud had delivered on the promise of cost savings. 80% said the cloud is expensive and getting more expensive. And perhaps most surprising, 20% said they have already moved or plan to move certain workloads back to on-premises data centers. I've certainly seen that with certain data warehouse workloads that have, stable workloads, stable expectations, where scalability and elasticity of the cloud aren't really required. So for better cost predictability and, in fact, lower cost in many cases, seeing some companies, some clients we work with, actually moving certain workloads or keeping certain workloads on-prem. So particularly if there's a recession, I would say we can expect cloud. It's already happened that cloud adoption is decelerating, and not to say that it's not still growing, but growing more slowly. And perhaps this is going to put some cost pressure on the major public clouds, which would be a good thing.
Yeah, it's interesting. My current hypothesis is that the cloud companies, the hyperscalers, the big three, Google, Amazon, Azure, they're not really passing on the Moore's Law dividend like they should be. Like, so if you buy some hardware and you know that it's going to be twice as fast for the same price, or in 18 months, and it's amazing. You should be able to. Cloud costs should be continuing to drop, but that's not the case. And a lot of that is to do with the fact that these hyperscalers have to continue to develop out these massive data centers around the world, and they need the development funds to do that. And so I think that's part of it. But sure, certainly we're seeing repatriation of workloads that don't make sense in the cloud are definitely coming back for sure.
And I think we'll see cloud customers getting shrewd about using the resources more effectively, spotting redundancies, spotting overlaps, spotting ways to economize on the use of resources.
Yeah, and to Amazon's credit, at AWS reInvent, their cost effectiveness was one of the hottest topics, and they keep talking about how you're running big AI workloads and things like that. They have a variety of custom hardware and special capabilities to design that are supposed to be more cost effective than any other approach, and that remains to be seen. We'll see what the industry has to say about that. But speaking of hardware and custom hardware, the chip business is currently in trouble with the current economic conditions, and one of the things that is often put off the most is big capital investments in end user hardware when things aren't going very well. And 2023 is definitely sizing up to be a challenging time for a lot of companies. And so we've seen poor results from Texas Instruments, from A&D, and especially Intel, as buyers put off purchases, trying to squeeze a little more performance out of the existing portfolio of hardware that they have. The only bright spot is really around artificial intelligence, which is very compute intensive. In fact, I call it the most important competitive capability that organizations have to develop. You have to build a large language model and other capabilities for your organization's data. It's literally an arms race, but it's not sufficient to raise a lot of the results for these chip companies, which make a lot of end user computing hardware. But things like Intel's new 4th generation Xeon server chip, which is designed for this really crushing workloads, is going to help. But that's not what a lot of these chip makers are providing. A lot of consumer grade chips are not moving right now, and so this is going to be a challenge. We're going to see, especially as there's talk in Congress about limiting the purchase of tech from China, and that's a major source for a lot of these inexpensive chips. That may help these companies, these chip companies, but it's going to be an area to watch. I think the server business is going to remain very good, but consumer compute hardware is going to be a real challenge for, I think, the next couple of years. So it'll be something to.
Actually, I've been hearing some of the cloud companies, particularly with their sustainability initiatives, talking about pushing out the retirement of generations of servers. So keeping current servers in place, so that will hit the commercial grade stuff as well. But that's it for this week's news summary. Stay tuned for Dion's take on the ChatGPT craze and my panel discussion with innovative data decision leaders.
Hello, this is Dion Hinchcliffe, VP and Principal Analyst at Constellation Research, and we're here to explore ChatGPT, conversational AI and chatbots. Well, we've had them around for a while, but it's never really hit it big or gone mainstream until ChatGPT arrived, that is. It was a viral phenomenon that was launched on November 30th, 2022. We got 1 million users in just first 5 days, one of the fastest adopted digital products in the world. And now it is a top 50 destination site on the internet. And in short, what it is, and you probably use it already, it appears to be an incredibly versatile service that uses the collective open knowledge of the world to answer questions. And so what does that mean? And who are the people behind it, OpenAI? And so we're going to talk about what ChatGPT is, what makes it special, what it can do, and what it can't do, which for many purposes may be even the most important topic. ChatGPT, however, didn't just suddenly appear out of nowhere. It has built on a long history. It started with the creation of OpenAI in 2015, which is founded by a whole host of well-known figures in Silicon Valley, from Elon Musk to Peter Thiel. The timeline, in April 2016, OpenAI released OpenAI Gym, a platform for reinforcement learning, and then they released Universe, which was how to measure and train general intelligence and AI. And in 2018, Elon Musk himself resigned, citing a conflict of interest because he had other AI projects that he was working on. And in 2020, OpenAI announced what became one of its most important foundational products in AI, that's GPT-3. It's what's known as a large language model. We'll talk about what that is, but it's trained on trillions of words from the internet. And it has an API, meaning that you can add ChatGPT-like features and other things related to their AI foundation that they've built right into your own products and services. And that has gotten a lot of attention. OpenAI introduced DALL-E, which allows you to use natural language to generate high-quality images, which was fairly popular. But nothing was quite like ChatGPT, which launched in November 2022. And then that was so popular that made a investment of up to $20 billion in the platform. I'm betting this is going to be the next big thing. And it may just in fact be that big. It's basically a kind of a seismic force in the tech scene in 2023. And to see what can happen, this is the provocation. The online media site BuzzFeed announced recently that it was going to use ChatGPT in some cases instead of writers, and their stock went up 127% in one day, and it went up more in subsequent days, showing the promise of the technology to create potentially higher profits because you can do more work with the same people or the same work with less people. We'll see how all that works out. But the magic behind ChatGPT is that it's a large language model. And that is the type of machine learning approach to taking a lot of information and then be able to create a general model behind it so that you can create a lot of interesting outcomes, like asking the model questions to refer to all the things that it's studied to give you outputs. And many people have been working on these. Large language models are essentially a computing arms race. It's the new arms race. And you see the GPT-3 is one of the largest ones, and why it produces also, not the only reason, but why it tends to produce particularly compelling outputs. And it takes a long time to train these models. And GPT-3, of course, is what underpins ChatGPT, which is a natural language way to kind of query the model. When you're typing into ChatGPT, you're actually querying this massive model that requires enormous resources, even just to query. And so it's using compute power and massive amounts of information in a much more intelligent way than, let's say, a search engine which was a previous version of doing this, saying, I want to type this in, what are the most popular web pages around that topic. ChatGPT is something deeper still. But most people are not aware of the massive compute resources required to create a large language model, and why only the largest companies in the world can create them. There's estimates that to create a competitive large language model now could cost up to $100 million each. And ChatGPT 4 is coming, which is going to continue to create an interesting competitive landscape. And so one of the questions all of this is really going to boil down to, we're going to dive into what you can do with ChatGPT in just a second, is what will your organization, when will your organization, it's not really if, it's now when will your organization turn its own knowledge, its own private knowledge behind its doors into its own large language model, so you can begin to ask your organization about everything that it knows in a conversational way. And so you take all your documents, data, and conversations, and then create a universe of organization-specific knowledge that you can tap into very quickly with Chat AI. It has privacy and security implications, knowledge worker and productivity and attrition and redundancy implications. But it's a very exciting time. I mean, we haven't seen this sort of excitement amount of technology in a couple of years. So this is all nice to know. You kind of understand the background, but what can ChatGPT actually do? And what's remarkable is it can do a lot of things. It can answer most questions about general human knowledge. The more information was out there on the internet to begin with, the better the answer tends to be. But it can author stories and letters, write and debug computer programs. And it can do that pretty well. I've seen some amazing examples of how a non-programmer can develop an application on the internet, for the internet, in just a couple hours using ChatGPT. It can compose music and answer test questions, write poetry, emulate a Linux system, simulate scenarios with multiple people. And what's remarkable, when I asked ChatGPT about me, it knew about me, and I said, well, write something about a topic in my own voice, and it did that. It can write in the style or tone of any known or fictional person. And it can do this with context, conversational context. It knows what you asked before and uses a lot of that to kind of cue what it's going to do for you next. So you can continue to ask questions or provide information that will remember this in its subsequent answers. So it's really, quite intelligent, as you would kind of expect AI to be. And it really shines at workplace tasks. And I'm now working on a report that talks about using this kind of very powerful conversational AI in everyday work, because it can write job postings complete with very detailed qualifications. So you can automate almost any simple task and build workflows around it. Create seed ideas. It's masterful at this for almost any creative task. You can write a resume, solve math and business problems step by step. Although, depending on how much math you want it to do, your mileage may vary. But if you're talking about the concepts about how around math, it can explain them very well. Get advice in difficult work situations. Create content in almost any language. Prepare for meetings, presentations, and interviews. So you can get tailored technical support, almost any topic. And a lot of CTOs I've been talking with are looking at that, saying, "Hey, I already read all our knowledge bases, or many of them anyway. Why can't we just put it in charge of supporting being frontline support for our product?" So these are just a small list of what ChatGPT can do. And it's really quite powerful. However, it's important to understand what ChatGPT can't do. And ChatGPT's predecessor, InstructGPT, could produce harmful responses. So they had to take a step back and say, well, all right, how do we put a layer over it that really stop it from being misused to doing bad things? Because it could help. It knows a lot and can tell you how to do all sorts of things, and tap into the anarchist cookbook and content like that. So it will not enable criminal activity, at least not easily. Create hate speech, write phishing emails and malware. There are certain ways around this, but I think most of these will be plugged over time. But it's important to know that ChatGPT is also not good at providing trustworthy knowledge. You always must check it before you can use it. And that adds a little bit of a burden of using it. Some things are self-evident true, but some things have to be checked. And providing knowledge in which there's not a lot of information out there, or if it's too recent, because ChatGPT takes the large language model underneath it takes it so long that to generate that it's not up to date in real time yet anyway. Or creating certain types of really good creative content like music. So you have to know what it can and cannot do. And largely those limitations are workable. But there are further worries or concerns about this kind of very powerful AI being released upon the average worker, and especially around the weakening of the perceived value of the knowledge worker when so many fairly deep and profound questions, technical questions can be asked. And ChatGPT can get pretty far along in applying those things to a lot of problems. That can be used to evade or work, plagiarize schoolwork, could create divisive or polarizing speech at scale. Even the effects on democracy. So writing millions of automated comments to affect the process of new legislation. And its impact on unemployment is unknown yet, but there's likely to be some, even though actually all technology revolutions up to this time have always created more jobs than they've destroyed. It's unclear what's going to happen when this powerful technology rolls out so quickly. But the possibilities are profound. We can have these knowledge bots that are so cheap, that can do so many things for us, really accelerate and automate our lives. And most of us, or many people talk about, we're mostly worried about trusting. Let's look at that data in just a minute. Most worried about trusting ChatGPT, and not really worried about the employment or hiring implications. What we will see, however, is a great increase in the quality and the depth of work, and quantity too, I think. Significant productivity gains, and it can be a profound trigger to human creativity, which we can still do remarkably well if we're given even better tools to create it. So all these things seem manageable. We'll have to be watching this very closely. Maybe we do have to worry about the negative potential and the trust implications. And I did ask our mostly CIO participants of our executive network what they're planning to do with conversational AI. Most of them are still studying it. Some of them have pilots, and some of them started rolling it out. Nobody's using it widely in our survey anyway. And where they thought they would find it most valuable is in customer support, enhancing customer experience, reducing marketing content, taking the manual drudgery out of technology issues, and also just generating revenue. But the big concern, if you look at all of them, not everyone's really sure it's useful. They not sure that their organization understands the impact of the competitive implications. But the big concern overall is really not knowing if you can truly trust it, making really important decisions. Having a big oops moment where someone uses content created by ChatGPT and it backfires, and what is that going to mean? Who's responsible? Who's liable? And again, most likely these things will be worked through, but it's a valid point. So that's basically where we are with ChatGPT. And so something to watch very closely in 2023. We expect lots of news. OpenAI is moving extremely fast. And if you have any other questions, I hope you reach out to me.
Nine out of 10 involve harnessing your data in some way to drive transformation, to drive innovation, to drive those breakthrough customer experiences. We're seeing many different ways of doing it, though, and today's guests are going to dive right in on this. Some patterns persist. Centralized attempts to manage our centralized data. The old EDW evolved. We had the data lakes. We got the lake houses today, but now we're also seeing these distributed approaches. It came up in the blast off this morning. Distributed emerging with things like fabrics and mesh. What are you seeing out there succeeding in the market? Are these complementary, or is one taking over for the marketplace?
Let me break this down into two problem sets, and then if you solve this, you'll automatically see where the solutions might lie for many customers, right? Let's break it into two parts: the data part and then the insights part. On the data part, there are three forces acting on it, right? There is the pull from the business, right? This is the business value. This is the reason why data wants to be liberated. Then there is the sovereignty of data. This is privacy, security, auditing capabilities, etc. And this is slowing down the liberation of data. And then the third one is the quality of data. And what do I mean by quality? It is latency. How quickly can I get it? Or currency. How recent is this data? Formats. Is it in an open format or a closed format? Structure. Is it structured or unstructured, etc. This is all related to the quality, the ephemeral quality of this data. And that's the three forces acting on the data itself, right? And then you have the insight factory, and it could be AI, it could be whatever, but fundamentally there is a learning set, and then there is the inference set. So this is a known construct. In that construct, we need to figure out how we can get value out of this data. And what we find most customers do who are successful is that they recognize the forces acting on it and figure out what is the best solution that works best for them.
We talk a lot about the idea of centralization, and over the years, it took a lot of companies a lot of effort. Where the IT group would say, hey, give me this requirement, and the business would say, I don't know what I need just yet. And as the companies evolved over time and the analytic needs evolved over time, the IT group basically said, oh, you want all of the data? I'm just going to put it in the centralized repository. We'll call it a data lake. Initially, over the last 10 years, it was Hadoop. Now it's the cloud-based architectures like an Amazon S3 or an Amazon or Azure Blob Storage. But it basically took the cost of all the work that the IT group would do around the centralization and the integration of that data and pushed it to just, hey, I'm going to give you this uncurated amount of data. It's going to be sitting here in this lake. And it is now the responsibility of the business to go find that data, curate it, and then put it back to some analytic insight. And so the cost shifted. The cost shifted from IT to the business to do all the integration work. And what we're finding now is that the business analysts, the data scientists, are struggling with the integration of all of that curated data, and they're running into the same problem that we had 20 years ago. So this idea of being able to do analytics at scale, where you're not creating just one analytic model or machine learning algorithm or AI, you're creating hundreds of thousands of these to run your business. You need to be able to do that at scale. And that requires the integration, Chris had talked about it earlier, from Teradata around model ops, being able to have this kind of analytic ops capability, which is now kind of emerging in the marketplace.
Now we move on to some practitioners who are harnessing that data to drive some decisions. Indy Cho, your Area Vice President of Data Science and Analytics at Costco. And you joined not so long ago, and you told me that they've always been data-driven, but it tended to be everybody had their own data and used their own spreadsheets and made data-driven decisions. You're trying to get to more of a centralized, scaled approach. You've got some new workloads like supply chain and manufacturing in addition to the retail. Tell us about what drove that change, the need for the centralization and the workloads and decisions you're doing in each of these areas.
Yeah, so what drove that decision was I think a lot of it was driven by COVID, right? So I think everybody at the start of COVID made the mad dash to go to Costco to try to get your toilet paper and all of your wipes and everything like that. And then you kept a really close eye in terms of whether or not the warehouse was going to have it in stock next week. Well, I mean, there was a huge issue in the supply chain, and right in the middle of, right at the start of COVID, Costco actually went out and did acquisition of a last mile delivery service, and then when it had problems with a lot of its imports, it decided, well, gosh darn, we're just going to go ahead and take control of that too, so that we keep all of our steel, we don't call them shelves, by the way, we call them steel because we're warehouses, stocked, right? So we end up kind of expanding our data ecosystem, both all the way to last mile delivery, and then all the way down into deeply into our supply chain. So, and we discovered a couple of interesting things. One is you can't always trust what you're given when it comes to data, right? I think that's kind of what you were mentioning as well. So basic things like imports, being able to track ETAs, right? You think that'd be pretty simple nowadays. Hey, when's my shipment going to arrive? We were told one answer. What we learned is, there's no, exactly. It's a bit of a random number generator is the answer that we were given. When we actually got a hold of all the data from actually managing our own charters, we were like, well, I think that's a really good use case to put some basic statistical modeling and data science against to actually try to get better answers for our members so we can make better buying decisions. The second, the second issue that it created is it really increased the volume of the data estate that we were going to have to manage. And so what we ended up doing is, we've got, when I first started Costco, I did an inventory of all the various different reports, and don't show this number outside of here, but we've got over 10,000 reports that we use to manage our business today.
Common story.
10,000 Costco, right? Now you add in the complexities of supply chain, success is not another 10,000 reports, right? I think we've got to think about our entire data ecosystem entirely differently, and that's part of what I'm trying to think through right now.
IT distribution is a business where a lot of traditional enterprises reside that are dependent on ERPs, don't usually have global data lakes, and are not very cloud native or platform native at all. So imagine now you drastically go from what were a past transaction to a total real-time data environment. So it's like handing people a brand new Ferrari who've never even driven a car before, right? So you get all these sets of data that you have to now go and digest and initially help your own business to grow as you start shining the light on your life cycle end to end, but also assist all our partner ecosystem to grow, right? Sanjeev mentioned it. For us, we do about we have about 2,000 OEMs we deal with yearly. We have about 170,000 reseller partners that we do. So the ecosystem and the touch points that you can imagine to serve all those end users via those resellers in a two-tier environment is huge. So suddenly now you sit on all that data and you can take a lot of really good informed decisions at your fingertips and enable also your own business owners to do that, right? So we start with customer experience and then we have the business define this so that in the real beauty really should be that we really know what data we're looking for in order to take those decisions.
Yeah, well, you can imagine being at a company like United Healthcare, the past 2.5 years have been chaos from an analytic perspective, developing codes, understanding that we need to change from weekly or monthly analytic data sets to daily or multiple times during the day has been an incredible transformation. But as you look forward to what does the future hold, in the healthcare space, it really comes back to a lot of the conversations that have been happening on stage today. The transformation of the workforce has been incredible. The retirement of the baby boomers and the influx of millennials across the population has been really insightful. Millennials are now the top workforce in almost every industry across the country. And as that starts to happen, it's going to change the whole healthcare system. As I start to look at the data, millennials use the healthcare system very differently than their counterparts in other generations. They go to the ER the most, they go to the urgent care the most, they use telehealth the most, and they use brick and mortar PCPs the least. But now our millennials are turning 40. They're developing heart disease and hypertension and diabetes and things like that. So now, as we kind of come out of the pandemic, it's really important that the healthcare system change dynamically to meet the needs of the millennial population when the employer health world has really been created to support baby boomers. How do we change and support the needs of the millennials? So it all comes back to they want care when they want it, and they want it right now from a timing perspective. So how do we make sure that virtual care can meet their needs, not just treat colds and flus and headaches, but that virtual care can actually become primary care for these individuals. And analytically, you need to make sure that those doctors don't turn into data miners. We need to make sure that analytically we're feeding them with gaps in care and opportunity so those virtual primary care physicians can treat the holistic view of that patient. Analytically, we've historically spent a lot of our time looking in the rearview mirror, so looking to see what's happened 6 months ago, 6 years ago across the population. But as we partner with companies like Teradata and DeLorean AI, we're starting to get more into how do we start to predict the future? What's going to happen next week, next month, next year? So as we start to educate both the provider system and internally our care management systems, how do we start to understand who is that next diabetic, that next heart disease patient, and start talking to them now versus waiting for that event to happen?
You know, I speak about the doorknob problem all the time. We go to a doctor, right, in physical, you go to a PCP, you go to a doctor, and the doctor says, how are you doing? I said, great. Are you running? Yes. Are you eating good food? Excellent. Are you doing your medication? Perfect. Is there anything else I should be concerned about? Oh, nothing. We're good. Great. Your PCP, your appointment's over, go home. And you walk out and you're just about to leave and you hold the doorknob and say, doctor, I have this small wart in my leg. Is that an area of concern? It's the doorknob question, right? And that's the physical interaction that you get with the physician. That's why you want to go to a doctor, in that you have the doubt. You don't want to know whether you can have that conversation in a virtual environment. In a virtual environment, you do this virtual healthcare thing. The last thing is, okay, great, leave. And then there's no opportunity to do that doorknob, right? And so for me, we should mix that. We need data to help us with that, but we also need to figure out how the experience needs to evolve to allow people the opportunity to have that doorknob question.
So I think the biggest problem when you run into a culture that's matured, like Costco has over 40 years, trying to bring them out to where a lot of folks out here probably are is going to be a huge, well, so it's not going to be a challenge, it's going to be a non-starter, to be quite frank with you. So, I'm a product manager at heart and a change agent at heart, so I'm thinking it's the magic box, right? So go to those spreadsheets, find that magic box. That's where you put the data science that says, hey, listen, if you're looking for an ETA, going back to the supply chain example, that's what the ETA is going to tell you, right? I don't need to go bring them out of their spreadsheets to actually be able to give them the answers that they actually need.
Just the simplicity of being able to do something right away on that platform versus needing to pass a series of phone calls or having people needing to intervene just to calculate the right price for a quote. Whereby, thanks to the platform, we're able to provide insights, recommendations, and various data at their fingertips that can trigger things such as solutions and bundles, right? So you're prompting, actually, thanks to that setup, you're prompting a far faster purchase decision also, and business development growth with this. So there's a lot you can do, and also because you have a platform that is an experience-driven platform, it ends up really serving the needs there from the partners, that you don't overcharge them with information that they don't need and need to dig through every day.
The last 20 years, the data and analytics groups kind of grew up separate. They were always the stepchild group of the organization, and now over the last couple of years, it's been the centerpiece of the organization, and companies are now trying to figure out how to harness that. So the big shift for us was the movement to the cloud. So the CIO tapped the enterprise architecture team and said, go build your the new cloud state architecture and how that's going to look. And for us within the data and analytics space, the enterprise architecture group was always the one that would make the box, and they would just put the name data warehouse or data lake in it. What we're finding is the enterprise architecture role is actually the one putting the name of a vendor in that box as well. And it's within our space, and it's within all of the other surrounding technologies.
Right. If it doesn't make sense, usually that's what we try to obtain through the jobs. We validate first where the business value is before we go and start building product and functionality around it, and actually data serves the purpose of that as an outcome.
Well, that's a wrap for episode 51 of CRTV. Get set for our next episode coming in 2 weeks.
As Right Watch for co-hosts Holger Mueller and Liz Miller, who will bring you episode 52 of CRTV. In the meantime, follow us on Twitter at CRTV_show, at our website, ConstellationR.com, and on LinkedIn at #CRTV show.
Thanks for watching and have a great week.
Too easy.
Yeah.
Great. I know you guys aren't giving me much to work with in terms of mistakes. Come on. I know, because I could probably do double. I could probably do half an episode of bloopers when it's like Liz and Holger, so it kind of balances out.
Did you catch that, Hannah? I gave you a little pause.
Yeah, that was great. That was perfect.
Cut that.
All right, hello, this is Dion Hinchcliffe, VP and Principal Analyst at Constellation Research, and here we're going to talk about GPT. Nope, start over again.
Where's the closest ski hill, and do you have an extra room so I can come skiing?
Of course, always.
Honestly, I would legitimately take up that offer if it was on the table.
So
next CRTV episode, you and Hannah are going to be in the same room, and
there we go, exactly.
Wow.
It'll be the après ski CRTV episode.